Steven Spielberg is undeniably, without a question, the most commercially successful movie director of all time. And with a total box office gross of over $10 billion, his name has become directly synonymous with the very idea of blockbuster cinema.
You can't create a story that you haven't yourself lived in some way. Otherwise, you are just a craftsman.
From classic artifact adventures to timeless emotional dramas, Spielberg's fingerprints are all over the most iconic films of the last 5 decades. In this video, we're breaking down the budget and box office revenue of every Steven Spielberg film, while also exploring the behind-the-scenes stories that turned a young filmmaker into the wealthiest director in Hollywood history. With 23 Oscar nominations, 3 Academy Awards, 3 Golden Globes, and 7 films inducted in the National Film Registry by the Library of Congress, Spielberg's story has been nothing short of a legendary ride. Steven Spielberg directed his first feature-length film at just 24 years old, but his command over mood, pacing, and visual storytelling carried the kind of precision and craftsmanship that instantly set him apart from other young directors in Hollywood at the time. The movie follows the story of David Mann, a quiet, unassuming salesman who sets out on a routine business trip through the dry, desolate roads of the California desert, only to find himself relentlessly hunted by a mysterious, murderous truck that seems hell-bent on trying to kill him. Duel is based on a short story by Richard Matheson and was originally produced for ABC's Movie of the Week with a modest budget of $450,000, but it quickly outgrew its television roots.
My assistant, Nona Tyson, found Duel. She said, I read this article, this short story by Richard Matheson. She said, I want you to read this short story. I think this is right up your alley. And I read the short story and I said, wow, this is terrifying. This is like a Hitchcock movie. It's like Psycho with the birds, only it's on wheels. A truck chasing a salesman through the desert.
After the US broadcast, the response in Europe was so strong that Universal Pictures decided to give it a theatrical release. The film went on to make approximately $5 million during its limited international run, more than 10 times its original budget. And while it wasn't released theatrically in the US, its success abroad caught the attention of Hollywood's biggest players. And with an impressive 89% critic rating, Duel marked the true beginning of Spielberg's career, proving he could turn a simple premise and tight schedule into gripping cinema. And just 3 years later, he would make his real official debut on the backroads of Texas. The Sugarland Express is a film loosely inspired by the real-life story of Ila Fey and Bobby Dent, who in 1969 kidnapped a Texas state trooper and led police on a chaotic high-speed chase in a desperate attempt to get back their son. It's a story about love and loss, told through the lens of 2 flawed but sympathetic protagonists driven to extremes by a broken system. Spielberg approached the material with a slight mix of humor and tension, with sweeping, long tracking shots across sun-soaked Texas highways and intimate character moments that highlight the emotional stakes. For his first theatrical film, Spielberg was working with a $3 million budget, which was modest by Hollywood standards, but a significant step up from his television roots. The production was shot entirely on location across Texas, capturing wide stretches of rural roads and dry southern heat that added a lived-in authenticity to the film's atmosphere. When it hit theaters, the Sugarland Express quietly turned a decent profit, bringing in over $12 million worldwide, making it a modest commercial success. And even more importantly, it was proof that Spielberg could handle a feature film from start to finish.
Dick Zanuck and David Brown, who came onto the project to help me get it made, because I wasn't making any headway. They kind of liked the script and they came on and they took over the producing of it. And they suggested Goldie Hawn. I went to her house one day and met with her. She loved the character, Eugene Poplin, had a lot of great ideas about it, had some changes she wanted me to make, which we did. And then she said yes, and no sooner than Goldie said yes did we have a start date.
Sugarland may not have been a runaway hit, but it was a clear signal that Spielberg wasn't just talented, he could deliver on a full-scale production. And with an 87% critic rating and a strong return at the box office, studios knew they had something special on their hands, but nothing could prepare them for what was about to come next. On the shores of the quiet seaside town, a young woman goes for a swim and never comes back, and her death is blamed on a random shark. But as bodies begin to pile up, the town's police chief realizes something much bigger and much more dangerous was lurking in the waters. The series of events and everything surrounding this film has directly and indirectly played a part in the way we see movies today. Jaws was based on Peter Benchley's best-selling novel, which was inspired by a series of shark attacks along the New Jersey coast in 1916. Universal Pictures quickly acquired the film rights, and after a few director options fell through, a relatively unknown 26-year-old Steven Spielberg was given the job largely on the strength of his work on Duel and the Sugarland Express. Due to constant mechanical failures with the animatronic device thingy, Spielberg had to keep the shark off screen for most of the film, relying instead on subtle suggestion and implication through water ripples, ominous music and low camera angles, letting audiences imagine the terror rather than see it outright.
We never fixed the shark, but in the cutting room I was able to use so little of it and imply so much more that when you finally do see the shark, it's a little bit lethargic, and that's where the story demanded that I show more than just the dorsal fin. That was the last few minutes of the movie.
This Hitchcockian approach became one of the film's most iconic strengths. The production was initially scheduled for 55 days with a modest $4 million budget, but constant delays and technical problems pushed filming over 100 days past schedule, ultimately driving the cost up to $9 million, a serious concern for Universal at the time. However, this risk paid off beyond anyone's wildest expectations, as Jaws became the highest-grossing film of all time at that point, earning a staggering $476 million worldwide. It held that box office record until Star Wars took the throne 2 years later. It was also the first film to cross the 100 million mark in the US, and its wide release model became the blueprint for every blockbuster that followed. Jaws also received widespread critical acclaim, earning a 97% approval rating and praise for Spielberg's masterful suspense, strong performances, and John Williams' iconic haunting score, as many called it the most thrilling film of the decade. It remains one of the most influential films ever made, not just for what it accomplished, but for what it inspired.
Everybody suggested I quit after Jaws. They said no movie will ever make this much money. And I kept saying, but don't you realize that I might make a picture that makes no money, that you might not like at all, but that might be my best picture as far as I'm concerned.
So if you're not motivated by money and success, how are you handling the fact that you've now got both?
Well, I don't have to handle it so much as long as I can feed the dog. You know, as long as the dog eats, we're real happy.
After Jaws, Spielberg could have played it safe, doubling down on monsters or thrillers, but instead he decided to take a very different approach. The idea for Close Encounters of the Third Kind had been with Spielberg since childhood, born from his fascination with UFO sightings and alien encounters. After Jaws, Spielberg used the success of his previous films as leverage to bring this vision to life, writing the script himself and fighting for creative control every step of the way. The story follows Roy Neary, an everyday electrician from Indiana whose life changes forever when he has a strange encounter with a UFO. But unlike most alien films of that era, these creatures aren't hostile. It's a story that explores what happens when the unknown arrives, not with threats or destruction, but with a desire for connection and understanding. Spielberg pioneered the use of practical light effects and motion control cameras in this film, blending cutting-edge visual techniques with intimate emotional storytelling. The movie was given a budget of $19 million, backed by Columbia Pictures, which was desperate for a hit. Spielberg ended up going $1 million over budget, but the studio stuck with him, betting on the same vision that made Jaws a phenomenon. That bet ultimately paid off. Close Encounters grossed over $171 million worldwide. While not quite Jaws-level numbers, it was still a massive success for a cerebral effects-driven sci-fi drama without a single explosion or alien attack. It proved Spielberg wasn't a one-hit wonder. He could follow a blockbuster with something bold, original, and emotional, and still pack theaters. Close Encounters holds a 90% critic rating, with most of the consensus praising its emotional depth and Spielberg's visionary filmmaking, which always seemed to push boundaries.
I became so fascinated with the whole UFO phenomena in the very early 70s that when Close Encounters was spawned, I couldn't wait to get to the end of Close Encounters because I introduced E.T.
After Close Encounters, Spielberg could do no wrong, so for his next project he took a hard left turn away from all the aliens and into complete chaos. "1941 is a loud, chaotic comedy about the panic that swept Los Angeles after the attack on Pearl Harbor. The plot follows a madcap series of events as the city braces for a rumored Japanese invasion. This film weaves together multiple storylines, from bumbling soldiers and terrified civilians to a rogue submarine captain and eccentric pilots. Spielberg wanted to prove he could do comedy films just as well as suspense and drama, but production was a mess, and the shoot was long and over budget, costing around $35 million, which was an astronomical sum for that time.
You know, you always hear people saying, that's typecasting. I'm not really interested in being typecast as an action director or as a horror director or as a science fantasy director. I'd like to try everything once, and when I think I've sampled everything, including comedy, which is the reason I'm making 41, I'll move on to other subjects.
The film ran into several creative clashes, pacing issues, and struggles to balance humor with story. And when it finally hit the theaters, both the studios and audiences were a bit confused. It earned approximately $94 million worldwide, which could still be seen as a decent return, but a disappointment compared to Spielberg's previous blockbusters. And with a rating of 39%, many critics were also underwhelmed. Some enjoyed its madcap energy and ambitious set pieces, while others felt it was unfocused, overly long, and lacked the emotional depth Spielberg was known for. But it was also a valuable lesson that helped him refine his craft and come back stronger. Just 2 years later, he teamed up with George Lucas to deliver a film that would redefine adventure cinema forever. The idea for Raiders of the Lost Ark came from George Lucas, who wanted to create a modern homage to the adventure serials of the 1930s. During a vacation in Hawaii in 1977, Lucas pitched the idea to Steven Spielberg, who loved the unique concept, and together with screenwriter Lawrence Kasdan, they went on to develop the story.
It was like recreating a Saturday matinee. It was a cliffhanger. So it was all those films I used to see when I was 8 or 9 years old, the revivals of all the black and white Republic serials. And suddenly I had a chance to make a serial in widescreen and Technicolor.
In the 70s and 80s, most action films had a very specific rhythm. They were cool, calculated, and built around the suave spy formula perfected by James Bond. But Raiders broke the mold. Instead of one long setup leading to a climax, Spielberg and Lucas designed the film as a series of cliffhangers. Despite its global scope and explosive action, Raiders was made on a lean budget of around $18 million. Spielberg, still recovering from the bloated chaos of 1941, was determined to stay tight and efficient. He storyboarded everything, shot quickly, and made sure every dollar showed up on screen. It was fast, focused, and efficient, a tight 73-day shoot where Spielberg didn't allow himself the luxury of dozens of takes. And it worked. The film grossed an impressive $389 million, a staggering return on its $18 million budget. It earned back over 21 times its production cost. It was also the highest-grossing film of 1981, and it dominated the box office for nearly a year, staying in theaters for over 9 months. It established Indiana Jones as a franchise icon, paving the way for sequels, novels, video games, and theme park attractions. Raiders also earned 9 Academy Award nominations, winning 4 for art direction, film editing, sound, and visual effects. And it was later added to the National Film Registry for its cultural and cinematic importance. It currently holds a 94% critic score, with widespread acclaim for its exhilarating pacing, iconic set pieces, and Spielberg's masterful direction, a film many called a perfect blend of action and storytelling. Regardless, more than anything, Raiders set a new standard for what adventure films could be. After proving he could conquer the box office with action and adventure, Spielberg turned to something more personal, a once-in-a-lifetime film that would launch him into a whole new stratosphere. E.T. is widely regarded as one of the most treasured family films of the 80s, and one of the most important films in cinema. A heartfelt universal story about friendship, loneliness, and childhood wonder. Spielberg has tagged this as one of his most personal films, drawn from the pain of his parents' divorce and his own childhood isolation.
Which was really a story about my mom and dad when they got divorced, and how I felt as a kid, wanting a friend like that to fill the void.
The screenplay was written by Melissa Matheson, who captured that childlike innocence with genuine authenticity and warmth. Spielberg also insisted that the film be shot in chronological order, which at that point was a bit rare in Hollywood. This allowed the young actors evolve emotionally alongside their characters, also leaving room for them to improvise. It's a story told entirely from a child's point of view, with low camera angles, minimal exposition, and a world where adults may come off as distant or abstract. Spielberg became fascinated by the idea of friendly extraterrestrials, not as godlike beings or threats to humanity, but as lost gentle creatures just trying to find their way home. And although it would later become one of the most iconic films of all time, it was made on a $10 million budget. By Hollywood standards, even in 1982, that was a modest budget, especially for a sci-fi film featuring practical effects, animatronics, and any other out-of-the-box thing Spielberg could think of. But this movie surpassed even the most optimistic expectations. In an era before social media or instant hype, E.T. became a full-blown cultural event with a worldwide box office total of over $700 million, making it the highest-grossing film in history at the time. It surpassed Star Wars and held that title for over a decade, until Spielberg himself later surpassed his own record with Jurassic Park. When adjusted for inflation, E.T.'s worldwide box office is equivalent to well over $2.5 billion today. It also reportedly earned hundreds of millions more through product licensing and merchandise sales, from toys and lunchboxes to video games and costumes. E.T. became a global cultural phenomenon. Even years later, Re-releases and home video sales continued to pour in revenue. The film holds a near-perfect 99% critic score and is widely praised for its practical effects, emotional depth, and John Williams' unforgettable soundtrack. It also went on to earn 9 Academy Award nominations, taking home 4 Oscars, including Best Original Score, Best Visual Effects, Best Sound, and Best Sound Editing, cementing its place as both a technical and emotional triumph. After the monumental success of E.T., Spielberg really had nothing left to prove, but even at the height of his success, he wasn't slowing down. Set a year before the events of the first film, the story follows Indiana Jones as he crash lands in India and stumbles into a remote village whose children have mysteriously vanished. What begins as a rescue mission leads him deep into an underground temple ruled by a brutal cult. Temple of Doom stands apart from the rest of the Indiana Jones saga, not just in setting or tone, but in what it's really about underneath all the action. If Raiders was a mythic tale about good versus evil, Temple of Doom dives more into a darker psychological territory.
And there's a lot more action. This film does not have speed breaks like the last one had. This picture really moves perhaps twice as fast as Raiders.
With a much larger scope than Raiders, the film's budget was increased to $28 million, nearly double the original. That extra money went into everything: elaborate practical effects, massive set constructions, and globe-spanning locations. Despite the tonal shift, the film was a box office juggernaut, grossing over $333 million worldwide, more than 11 times its production budget, making it one of the highest-grossing films of 1984. Beyond ticket sales, Temple of Doom fueled massive merchandising success. The Indiana Jones brand became a full-fledged commercial empire, and this sequel played a major role in expanding its global reach. Temple of Doom holds a 77% critic score, with many praising the new direction and angle Spielberg had brought to the sequel. However, its dark tone and intense imagery divided some audiences and critics. By this point, Spielberg was unstoppable. In just a few years, he delivered massive box office hits, but now, he was about to take on something entirely different. Color Purple is an adaptation of Alice Walker's groundbreaking novel, which won both the Pulitzer Prize and the National Book Award. The story follows the harrowing yet ultimately empowering journey of Celie, a black woman who endures years of abuse, racism, and silence before discovering her own voice. Adapting such a deeply personal and culturally significant novel was a bold move for Steven Spielberg, who was known primarily for blockbusters like Jaws and E.T., but he approached the material with the utmost sensitivity.
It's, for me, a new form of movie making. Not to somebody else who's made dramatic pictures before, but for me it was an entirely new experience. So it's gratifying to hear wonderful things about it, and mainly it's gratifying to have been able to do it and have it behind me, and then realize that the experience has encouraged me to make more movies of a slightly more serious nature.
It's widely regarded as one of Spielberg's most emotionally resonant films, blending powerful storytelling with vivid, imaginative direction. The cast is stacked with now legendary names like Whoopi Goldberg, Danny Glover, and Oprah, with each of them delivering standout performances. It was filmed across scenic locations in North Carolina and uplifted by the rich, soulful score from Quincy Jones, making it an instant critical and cultural touchstone. Made on a budget of approximately $15 million, The Color Purple was a modest production, but one that demanded careful attention to detail, costume design, and performances. While not a blockbuster in the traditional sense, the film grossed a respectable $98 million, more than 6 times its production budget, making it not just a critical success but a highly profitable film. And that's before factoring in its continued growth through home video sales, television rights, and its enduring cultural relevance. The film received strong acclaim. It currently holds a 73% critic score, as many praised its emotional power and standout performances, along with Spielberg's ability to draw emotions out of audiences. While some critics question whether he was the right person to direct the film, even skeptics acknowledged the emotional power and precision he brought to the screen.
Supposing, though, Stephen, that it is not as financially successful because maybe it doesn't have the broad appeal that Raiders and some of the others have had, how would you feel about that?
Well, that's fine. In fact, that's what I expect, and that's what I expected when I took on the project, and it's one of the reasons I was very careful to not pump anybody up into thinking this was going to be a big blockbuster.
Color Purple received 11 Oscar nominations, including Best Picture and Best Director, but ended up not winning in any category. This snub by the Academy sparked public controversy and discussions surrounding Hollywood's recognition of films centered on black stories.
I haven't even allowed myself to deal that way, simply because my friend Tom Hulse, who played Amadeus, was fantastic in this movie and didn't win. And gave me some perspective on expectation.
Still, both financially and culturally, The Color Purple was a triumph, proving Spielberg could handle deeply personal and socially grounded stories just as powerfully as his cinematic spectacles. But his next film would take him back to a grander scale, set against the backdrop of war-torn Shanghai and filtered through the eyes of a child. After the emotional success of The Color Purple, Spielberg returned to large-scale filmmaking with Empire of the Sun, an ambitious World War II epic based on J.G. Ballard's autobiographical novel. The film revolves around Jim, a young British boy living in Shanghai, whose life is upended when Japan invades the city. Separated from his parents, he's forced to survive the harsh realities of life in an internment camp, an experience that hardens him and reshapes his worldview.
Well, the first attraction was, I think, the brilliant book that J.G. Ballard wrote. And certainly within it, it was this boy's incredible odyssey, partially, in many ways, based exactly on what happened to J.G. Ballard himself during the war.
Spielberg brings his signature visual flair and emotional storytelling to the film, but this time through a more restrained, introspective lens. Empire of the Sun marked the screen debut of 13-year-old Christian Bale, whose astonishing performance earned widespread praise and launched a prolific acting career. Shot on location in Spain and China, Empire of the Sun boasts sweeping cinematography, a moving John Williams score, and a haunting sense of lost innocence amidst the horrors of war. The film had a substantial budget of around $35 million, a significant leap from The Color Purple. However, despite critical acclaim and multiple award nominations, Empire of the Sun struggled at the box office, earning only $66 million worldwide. While it managed to double its production budget, it fell short of expectations for a Spielberg release, especially after the runaway success of his earlier blockbusters. However, over time, Empire of the Sun has grown in stature, often cited as one of Spielberg's most underappreciated works, a thoughtful, beautifully made war epic that marked a turning point in his evolution as a director. While Empire of the Sun may not have delivered blockbuster numbers, it marked an important step in Spielberg's evolution, showcasing a more mature, restrained approach to storytelling. But after back-to-back dramas, Spielberg was ready to return to familiar ground. After the grim tone of Temple of Doom, Spielberg wanted to bring Indiana Jones back to his roots, with globe-trotting bad guy mystery and a slight touch of awkward humor. The Last Crusade was designed to feel like a return to form, but it also introduced something new, which was a more emotional side. Spielberg wasn't just chasing another artifact. This time, he was chasing a story with some sort of emotional depth.
I was a little more in control of the third movie in terms of what it was going to be about. It was my idea to do a father-son relationship picture using the backdrop of Raiders to give it its, overdrive. And but George really wanted to go out on a sort of a celebration as opposed to anything too cerebral.
The dynamic between Harrison Ford and Sean Connery transformed The Last Crusade into more than just a thrill ride. It became a character-driven story about legacy, family, and faith. With a budget of $48 million, it was a major studio investment, but the returns were more than worth it. Indiana Jones and The Last Crusade grossed $474 million worldwide, making it the highest-grossing film of 1989. Adjusted for inflation, its global box office would be worth well over $1 billion today. It currently holds an 84% critic score, with many calling it a triumphant comeback after the divisive Temple of Doom. The chemistry between Ford and Connery was widely praised, and Spielberg was commended for recapturing the adventurous tone of the original while adding more emotional nuance. It further solidified Indiana Jones as one of the most iconic characters in film history, and proved once again that Spielberg could blend emotional storytelling with blockbuster entertainment better than almost anyone in the business. From both a financial and creative standpoint, The Last Crusade was a resounding success, a finale that, for a time, closed the original trilogy with heart, humor, and a well-earned sunset ride into legend. After taking Indy and his father on one last adventure, Spielberg made an unexpected detour. Always was Spielberg's passion project, a remake of the World War II-era film called A Guy Named Joe, but updated for a modern audience. Set against the backdrop of forest firefighting instead of aerial combat, the film tells the story of Pete Sandich, a reckless pilot played by Richard Dreyfuss, who dies in a fiery crash. But his spirit lingers, watching over his grieving girlfriend Dorinda, and even mentoring the man who might replace him both in the skies and in her heart. It's a story about love, loss, and letting go, one of Spielberg's most overtly sentimental works.
I couldn't find the right balance between humor and sensitivity and romance, and a lot of the earlier scripts were almost too funny and didn't leave much room for romance. Some of the later scripts were too soppy and sentimental, and so the balance there was never an equation in the balance. And finally, it really, literally, several months before I began shooting, I finally got a screenplay that was the perfect balance between romance and humor and kind of that sort of wishful thinking.
The movie carried a $31 million budget, which was modest by Spielberg standards, and visually, it showcased his signature style of glowing light, sweeping camera movements, and a dreamlike use of color, especially in the ghostly sequences. But despite its ambition and sincerity, Always didn't quite take off at the box office. It earned $74 million worldwide, turning a small profit, but nothing near the heights of his other work from that era. Critically, it received mixed reviews. While some praised its emotional ambition and visual beauty, others felt the story leaned too heavily into melodrama. In terms of profitability, Always made its money back through international release, home video, and TV rights. But it's one of the rare Spielberg films that didn't dominate the cultural conversation. Still, for Spielberg, it was a deeply personal story, a quiet tribute to love that lasts beyond the final goodbye. After the gentle, romantic tones of Always, Spielberg pivoted once again, this time into the realm of childhood fantasy. Hook is a fantasy adventure film that imagines a grown-up Peter Pan who leaves Neverland behind and forgets who he once was. Robin Williams stars as Peter Banning, a stressed and work-obsessed corporate lawyer who's lost touch with his imagination and family. But when his children are kidnapped by the vengeful Captain Hook, Peter is forced to return to Neverland, a world he no longer remembers, to rescue them. It's a movie based around the fear of growing up, as Spielberg uses the world of Neverland to explore themes like lost innocence, the value of imagination, and the struggle to balance adult responsibilities with the joy and freedom of childhood. In many ways, the film reflects Spielberg's own life at the time, a director at the height of his career, navigating the challenges of being a present father.
I didn't want to disappoint anybody. I didn't want to disappoint the audiences in tinkering with a renowned classic such as the original J.M. Barrie Peter Pan, and I didn't want to, disappoint the studios.
Robin Williams brings his boundless energy and emotional depth to the role, playing Peter with both comedic charm and genuine vulnerability. His performance and comedic timing is kind of what brings this movie to life, creating a memorable, nostalgic atmosphere. With a production budget of around $70 million, Hook was a major investment, one of the most expensive movies ever made at the time. But once again for Spielberg, the gamble paid off.
When somebody gives me more money than I've ever had to make a movie before, this is the most expensive film I've ever had my hands on. Not because that was the goal, but bringing Neverland to life happens to cost more money than bringing downtown Los Angeles to life.
The film pulled in over $300 million at the global box office, more than quadrupling its budget. That alone marked it as a clear commercial success. It became a dominant force in the home video market throughout the 90s, where its blend of family appeal, star power, and Spielberg's name helped drive massive DVD sales. However, most critics found Hook very underwhelming, giving it a 29% score, citing its uneven tone and overstuffed narrative. But the general audience was more receptive, earning the film a 76% audience score, as many viewers embraced its emotional core, memorable performances, and Robin Williams' nostalgic charm.
People said, "Do you have fun?" Damn straight. It was bliss to fly, to get to fight, you get to crow, you get to be on these amazing sets, you get to be in Neverland, you get to do all of this stuff. It is fantasy, and it was extraordinary, and it's magical. I saw it, and I went, it is magical.
For Spielberg, he had topped the box office nearly a dozen times since his debut, redefining the commercial viability of what a blockbuster could be, while still maintaining his integrity and artistic freedom. Now, he was about to take things a whole lot further. With a film so groundbreaking, it wouldn't just dominate the box office, it would change the entire landscape of cinema. Jurassic Park tells the story of a billionaire who somehow manages to build a theme park filled with very dangerous dinosaurs brought back through genetic science. And when these dinosaurs obviously turn on their creators, everyone gets thrust into a fight for survival. The idea for Jurassic Park began with the author, Michael Crichton, whose novel imagined a world where dinosaurs were no longer extinct, thanks to breakthroughs in cloning technology. Before the book even hit shelves, Spielberg caught wind of the concept and immediately saw the immense potential of what it could be on screen. So him and Universal went ahead to secure the rights to bring the movie to life.
There's such a reality to it that's why I got really interested in this, because I said, God, science and adventure just come smashing together, and now it's based on what is probably going to happen someday.
But bringing dinosaurs back to life on screen was no small feat. Jurassic Park was produced on a budget of approximately $63 million, which, while substantial for the early 1990s, was a calculated risk considering the groundbreaking special effects and ambitious scope of the film. Upon its release, Jurassic Park became a global phenomenon, grossing over $912 million worldwide during its initial theatrical run alone. This meant the film earned more than 14 times its production budget, an extraordinary return on investment. Further boosting its revenue, a 2013 re-release added around $115 million, pushing the total box office gross to over $1.5 billion, placing it among the most profitable movies of all time. But the money didn't stop with tickets. The film sparked a merchandising empire with toys, video games, theme parks, and many more. Jurassic Park instantly became a permanent pop culture fixture. This long tail of income continues to make the film one of Universal's most valuable and enduring franchises. Critically, the movie received wide acclaim, holding an impressive 91% critic score, praised for pushing boundaries with visual effects, storytelling, and adventure characters. While some noted that character development took a backseat to spectacle, few could deny the sheer impact of Spielberg's direction. The film's technical mastery didn't go unnoticed at the Academy Awards either. It won 3 Oscars for Best Sound Effects Editing, and Best Visual Effects, cementing its legacy as a technological milestone in filmmaking. It firmly established Steven Spielberg as one of the greatest filmmakers of all time. What came next was a whole new level of filmmaking. After this era of adventures and loud spectacle, Spielberg shifted gears into a whole new chapter of his career. This next phase brought him deeper stories, more critical acclaim, and films that touched millions on a different level. So to keep things tight and give each part of his career the spotlight it deserves, we're going to break this video down to 2 parts. The next episode would dive into every film he made after Jurassic Park, from Schindler's List and Saving Private Ryan, and all the way up to his most recent work, The Fabelmans. So to make sure you don't miss this next upload, please consider subscribing to the channel and hit that notification bell. Thank you so much for watching, and see you in the next one.